I should never have let my sister talk me into working for Merry Maids. I was laid off midway through the year and found myself unable to pay for things like food and rent. My sister, my roommate of 2 years, told me I should apply at Merry Maids until something better came along. She'd been working on and off with them for years, her grants and housing allowance from college paying off most of her bills, and told me that a little hard work wouldn't kill me. So far, she was right. Diana, the lady at the company, took my info and got me signed up. After a short training course and orientation, I was an official Merry Maid. What they never tell you in training, however, is that new maids are widely mistrusted by the clients. You have no resume and no one to vouch that you aren't a thief or a murderer, so most clients will refuse a new maid in favor of a vetted one. 2 weeks on the job, I didn't have a single client or a cent to my name. With my savings running low, I begged the service for someone, anyone, so I could make money enough to afford ramen noodles. The next day, she sent me a text that Miss Margaret Maisel had agreed to let me be her new maid. I cursed my luck, but I could hardly refuse. Margaret Maisel lived in the same apartment complex I did. Margaret, or Mad Maggie as we call her here, was a senile old lady who wandered around the neighborhood and talked to herself. She lived on the 5th floor and was widely avoided by most of the other tenants. She had only gotten crazier after her son had left a few years ago. She could usually be found in the cafe downstairs during the day as she babbled to herself and made life hell for the staff. The thought of going into her apartment made my skin crawl. But I needed the money, and if I turned her down, I'd probably get fired. I took my bucket from the closet and made my way up to the 5th floor. Maggie answered the door on the 3rd knock. She opened it a crack, one of her bulbous toad eyes peeking out at me. She took in my skirt with the company logo on it and my work bucket that also bore the company logo, but I could see her mistrust. Surely she had gotten a similar message, hadn't she? "Good afternoon, Miss Maisel. I'm here from Merry Maids, and I've come to clean your apartment." She looked at me through the crack in the door for another 30 seconds, the silence getting pretty uncomfortable, before closing it again so she could remove the chain that had been keeping it cracked. When I tell you that Maggie looks like a toad, you'll probably think I'm being rude. I'm really not. Maggie looks like a toad. She's about 5'2" and nearly as wide as she is tall. They say she has money. I know she never works, but she always looks so dumpy. She wears the same filthy red dress with a stuffed neck, scuffed black shoes, and a pair of gold glasses that make her 2 large eyes look even bigger. Her muddy red hair is always piled on top of her head in a sloppy bun, secured with a large hairpin. She came up to mid-chest on me, and we stood in the foyer looking at each other. "You live on the 2nd floor, she croaked, sounding like a pack-a-day smoker. It wasn't a question. She clearly wasn't as crazy as we all thought. "I do," I answered, not sure what to say. "Well, let me show you what you'll be doing," she said, shuffling into the apartment. I had honestly expected a filthy hovel, given the state of her clothes, but it was actually pretty clean. The kitchen had a sink with dishes in it, but it looked cleaner than mine most days. Maggie informed me that the dishes and the countertop would be part of my daily cleaning, as well as sweeping and mopping. We passed through the living room, but she made her way up to the hall bathroom instead. The bathroom was a bit messy, but having grown up with siblings, it was nothing I couldn't handle. Maggie told me I'd be responsible for the sink, the shower, the toilet, and the floors. As we left the bathroom, I thought we'd be heading into the 2 bedrooms in the back of the house, but Maggie started walking towards the living room instead. "Aren't we going to see the bedrooms?" I asked. Maggie stopped in the hallway, staring forward without looking at me. "No," she said after some deliberation, and I saw her slide the necklace out of her shirt as she started to stroke it. "They're included in the monthly bill. I don't mind cleaning them if you want them." "No," she said again. "You mustn't go in there. Jeffrey wouldn't like it." She said it almost too low for me to hear, but I still caught it. Jeffrey had been her son. He'd grown up in this complex, but been gone before my sister and I had moved in. People said he'd been a smart kid on his way to college, and his mother hadn't quite been ready to cut the apron strings yet. They had fought a lot, many screaming matches ending with a visit from the police, until one day, he just disappeared. Not long afterwards, people saw her talking to that necklace, usually calling it Jeffrey when she did. She'd been odd before, but people figured she had finally lost it after that. We came into the living room then, Maggie still stroking her necklace. The living room was gray, with a dark gray couch, light gray carpet, off-white walls that gave the appearance of storm clouds, and an armchair that looked like a rain cloud about to burst. There was an old TV set, one of those 50-pound ones with the dials, a pair of bookcases stuffed full of old paperbacks, and a haggard-looking Christmas tree covered in colorful balls of spun glass. Maggie told me that I was to vacuum in here, wipe down the TV with Pledge from under the sink, and dust the bookcase and the TV. "And the tree?" I asked. She looked startled by the question and glanced at the tree nervously. "No, I'll dust that myself. You just leave it be." And with that, I set about my tasks. For the first half hour, Maggie hovered close by, pretending to do things, but ultimately just keeping an eye on me. She pretended to bake in the kitchen as I cleaned the dishes and wiped the counter. She pretended to do laundry in the hall as I cleaned the bathtub and scrubbed the toilet. Then, as if she thought I was stupid, she pretended to read on the couch as I polished the TV and vacuumed the living room. I say she pretended because it was pretty obvious that she was watching me, while her hands made busy motions with whatever she was supposed to be doing at the time. That was the first look I got at the Christmas tree. Like an off-season Walmart special, it was an ancient plastic thing, hung with tinsel and lights that blinked dumbly from the green guts of the thing. It was hung with dazzling balls of glass, sparkling as the lights winked off of them, and I felt captivated by them as I worked. They swirled with their own strange patterns, with their own peculiar energy, and I felt almost drawn to them. I wanted a closer look, but that old bat had her froggy eyes on me, and I couldn't risk getting fired on my first day. I finished up in about an hour and put my things back in the bucket before saying I'd see her tomorrow. That was my first encounter with Mad Maggie and her strange house. My sister commiserated with me when she got home. Oh God, she's the worst. That old bag always followed me around when I cleaned her house, pretending to do stuff. She wouldn't even let me in the living room, kept her eyes on that damn Christmas tree the whole time. You know she keeps it up year-round. Won't let anyone near her to that weird glass menagerie of hers. "Yeah," I said leadingly. "Did you get a look at what was in those balls?" My sister shook her head. It looked like looping spirals, but the closest I ever got was when she had me haul that grungy TV up that she found on the street. I bet she still has it in her living room. I told her that she did, telling her how Mad Maggie had made me polish that tatty old thing, and we set about and made fun of the crazy old witch for the rest of the night. Even so, I found myself wondering about those balls. Why were they so important to her? When I'd offered to dust them, she had acted like I'd threatened to smash them. Why were those ornaments so valuable? I found myself thinking about them the next morning as I got ready to go back up there again. The next time I went to her apartment, she met me at the door and hovered as I cleaned again. She had left me a few dishes in the sink, some coffee stains on the countertop, and she cleaned leftovers out of the fridge as I worked before handing me a bag and telling me to take it out. I moved on to the bathroom, changing the garbage and wiping up the sink, and I found that she had stepped into the back room when I finished the bathroom. I made my way quickly to the living room and started vacuuming close to the tree. The tree blinked sadly, the balls sparkling invitingly as I vacuumed closer and closer. They were definitely blown glass, fragile and elegant as they hung in space. I could see intricate patterns inside each of them. I bent close, looking at one of the patterns, and could swear that I saw something moving. Each of the spheres had a different design in the middle, and the way the light played across them, the patterns almost seemed to shift and... "Careful!" Her yell cut across the vacuum noise and I almost bumped the tree stand. She ran towards me, her eyes on the balls, and she shot me a murderous look. I wasn't sure why. I hadn't done anything but vacuum, as far as she knew. "Sorry, ma'am. Didn't mean to get too close. I was just vacuuming, like you said." She didn't seem to buy it. She sat on the couch, TV on, as I finished my tasks. Her eyes never left me, though, and I got the distinct impression that I might not be invited back again. When I left, I heard her mini locks snap shut behind me, and she started talking to that weird necklace again as she returned to the couch. I didn't know if I would be invited back, but I knew I needed to have another look at those glass balls. I slept poorly that night, my dreams full of those strange little ornaments. In my dreams, each of them contained a solar system. As I stared at them, I felt myself sinking into them like a towering god, but even as I fell towards them, there was a shadow that loomed over me. I turned to look back just before I woke up and saw Maggie's crazed face staring at me like the eye through a microscope. The next day, I was given 5 new clients and told not to go back to Maggie's apartment. We have a new girl starting, and we always start them off at Maggie's to see if they'll last. The lady seemed to realize what she had said and laughed on the other end of the phone. "Sorry, I know it's unfair to test people, but you passed, so congratulations." I sat out that day with a full schedule and a troubled mind. I had hoped for at least one more day to look at Maggie's Menagerie, but it appeared that it wasn't going to be. As I was leaving, I passed a girl in a similar uniform coming in through the lobby. She was young, maybe 19, and her dark curls bobbed as she bustled along with her bucket and her handbag. She saw me and smiled, stopping to ask me about Maggie since it was her first day. I had some time before my first client and treated her to a coffee in the cafe. It was likely to be the nicest gesture she was going to get today. We chatted as we sipped our subpar, over-doctored coffee, and I learned that her name was Jeanette and she had just started business school. I'm hoping to get my business degree in 2 years as opposed to 3, so I can start working at my mom's fabric store. She's branching out in a few years, and she's offered me my own location if I can prove to her that I can handle myself. We made small talk, but inevitably the conversation came back to Maggie. What's she like, anyway? I heard she's a little odd, but she's ultimately harmless, right? I considered telling her about the tree and to warn her to stay away from it, but I decided that she would learn soon enough. Yeah, she's a little odd, but I don't think she's malicious. Just understand that she has some strange ways about her and that she takes her rules very seriously. I hear she's got a bit of a reputation, the girl said, lowering her voice. Girls tend to quit when they work for her. Some of them even go missing or just disappear altogether. I shrugged. It's a busy city. People tend to just leave when the cost of living gets too high. Jeanette nodded. This was known, but she made a sound as she sipped her tea that told me that wasn't all. A girl in my class said she'd had a roommate who worked for Mary Maid and got placed with Maggie. The girl didn't seem too worried about Maggie, but then she didn't come home one evening and never showed back up for her things. Her parents came to get them eventually and told her that there was a police report and that everyone was searching for her since they hadn't heard from her in days. I started to ask her if the roommate had mentioned the Christmas tree or the menagerie of small ornaments, but decided against it. After a few more minutes of polite chatter, I excused myself and wished her good luck on her first day. She thanked me and bounced off towards the elevators like she was going to meet her Prince Charming or something. Unfortunately for her, it looked like she was about to meet a witch instead. I spent the next few weeks cleaning rich people's condos or servicing dingy apartments with harried-looking mothers or frazzled-looking single fathers. As I worked, I gained more clients. By the end of the month, I had 15 regular customers that I saw at least once a week. I really had too much to deal with to think about Maggie or her glass baubles, but they were never far from my dreams, it seemed. I had the dream about the glass universe almost every night. Now, however, just before I woke up, the looming Maggie would croak out about how I didn't belong here, and I would wake up in a cold sweat with my heart racing. It had been almost 2 months since I'd been in her apartment, before I even thought about her in my waking hours. I was leaving one of my regulars to go do a special job, a job with better than average pay, when my phone rang. I picked it up and heard my sister on the other end, telling me that she'd be a little late tonight. "But it's our movie night," I whined with fake outrage. "I'll be there. I just have to stop off for one last job on the way home. Some of us didn't get invited to clean the judge's condo with the other bootlickers." I scoffed. "Hey, when you're the best, you don't have to kiss ass. So what's the job you have to do anyway?" "Oh, I gotta clean Mad Maggie's apartment before the end of the day. Apparently, Georgette hasn't been coming to work the last couple of days, and the old toad is livid." That made me pause. What happened to her? Who knows? I guess she couldn't hack it, so she went back to wherever it was she was from. "I'll see you later, sis. My train just stopped, and I'm late for my next client." I said bye and hung up, but her words stuck with me as I met the other girls at the lavish condo. We were supposed to be cleaning it top to bottom before the judge and his family arrived at 8 o'clock, but my mind was preoccupied with thoughts of the bubbly Jeanette just up and missing. She had seemed so excited about starting her new school and her new job, and I couldn't see her getting burned out in less than a month. Had something happened to her? Was it the same thing that had happened to the other girls that had disappeared when they started working for Maggie? "Hey, get the lead out, or you can just leave and not get paid. You're in the way," one of the girls shouted at me. I realized I'd been dithering around with the same task for a while and tried to put the idea out of my head. I had to work. I wanted the money, and by 7 o'clock, we'd be done. So I worked double time after being called out, and even the girl who had shouted at me had to agree that my reputation was well earned. We divided up the cash between the 5 of us, and they invited me to come out for drinks with them. I declined, saying that my roommate was waiting for me to start movie night, so we all said our goodbyes, and I left to get a bus for downtown. I arrived home to an empty apartment. My sister still wasn't back, and I wondered if she would be okay in Maggie's apartment. My sister was tough, though, and she'd been there before, hadn't she? I flopped onto the couch, kicking my shoes off and scrolling through Netflix as I tried to find something to watch until she got there. She'd be back any minute, and we'd order a pizza and watch movies and talk about the crappy day we'd both had. When my phone rang at 9 o'clock, I realized I'd fallen asleep, and my sister hadn't woken me up when she got in. The call was from Diana at Merry Maids. "Hey, could you do a little favor before you start today? I guess no one went over to clean Maisel's apartment last night. I know it's in your building, so could you stop by and clean it, please?" I struggled up off the couch, walking into my sister's room as I processed all this. I thought my sister was stopping by last night," I said, pushing her door open and finding her room empty and her bed unslept in. "I thought so too, but the old lady is saying no one's cleaned her apartment, and she's mad as hell about it. Can I count on you to clean it?" I stood in the doorway to my sister's room, not really feeling like I had much of a choice. "Yeah, I'll go." "Terrific," Diana said. "I appreciate it." I started calling my sister on the way up. Her phone rang and rang before finally going to voicemail. I heard her nasal voice tell me to leave a message, bitch, before the tone. I called her 3 more times, all of them going to voicemail, before I reached Maggie's floor and the elevator opened with a ding. I was in poor spirits when I knocked, but was greeted by a very different Maggie. Maggie was all smiles. Her energy was high, and her warmth almost changed her before my very eyes. She apologized for being rude on the phone with the lady from the agency, but she needed someone out here right away to clean. That poor Jeanette girl had just up and disappeared one night, and when no one had come last night either, she had just been so mad. She regretted it now, and she hoped that nothing had happened to Jeanette. This was a very different Maggie than I was used to seeing, and her new energy was almost as jarring as her old deranged self. I started cleaning in the kitchen, Maggie making herself a cup of coffee, as I tidied up the small mess in the sink and on the stove. The kitchen looked as clean and unused as it always did, and I was almost afraid to see the rest of the house if she'd freaked out over a mess. When I finished the kitchen, the old toad told me that she was going to the bathroom, and that she'd just tidy it up after she was done. "Here, why don't you have something warm before you start in the living room?" she said, offering me a cup of coffee that she'd been making. I took the cup hesitantly, but the coffee smelled rich and decadent as the steam hit my nostrils. She sipped at her own cup, looking at me expectantly, and it felt rude to at least not taste it as she went on smiling at me in that toadish way of hers. She excused herself as I took another long drink and went to the bathroom to freshen up. I set the cup down after she'd left, the coffee tasting wonderful, but not liking the way she watched me while I drank it. I wanted to clean the living room quickly so I could get out there and start looking for my sister. The living room was as spotless as always, but I fired up the vacuum and tried not to let my eyes linger on the Christmas tree that had haunted my dreams. As I slid the plastic head back and forth over the carpet, though, I found my eyes tracking back to the ornaments again and again. I kept catching movement out of the corner of my eye as I vacuumed, and I thought for sure that it was coming from one of those little balls. I told myself it was just the lights blinking behind them, but the longer it went on, the more certain I was it was something from inside the baubles. I started vacuuming closer to the tree, and as I did, I found that one of the little glass ornaments was indeed moving. It was shaking, ever so slightly, rocking from the vibrations of the vacuum, I had no doubt. As I got closer, I could tell it wasn't the vacuum making it move, though. The little pattern inside was undulating weirdly, and I finally took a knee next to the ball as I tried to get a better look. I could still hear the old toad puttering around in the bathroom, and if she caught me snooping at her precious menagerie, I guess she'd just kick me out and I'd never be able to come back again. I know now that there were worse things than being kicked out of her apartment. Hanging there was a new glass ball, a deep red one that was jouncing like someone was moving it. I stared hard at the little pattern, and when my eyes finally focused on it, I sat back hard on my rump and sucked in my breath. Inside the ball was a person, a girl only a few years older than me, with dark hair, a plaid skirt, and a shirt with the same name and number on it that mine had. I recognized her. Why wouldn't I? Hadn't I seen her every day for my entire life? Hadn't I waited for her to come home last night? "You shouldn't have gotten so nosy, dearie," said a froggy voice from right behind me. I turned to see Maggie, standing a couch's distance away, her eyes smiling cruelly as her mouth stretched sweetly. I tried to stand, but my legs were feeling a little wobbly. My head shimmered as I tried to get up, and I wondered what the hell was wrong with me. I hadn't been crouched long enough for my legs to have fallen asleep, and I certainly hadn't stood up, so my head shouldn't be spinning. The hunched creature was rolling like a wave in front of me, and I tried to sweep my arms at her as she got close. She walked in slow, not needing to hurry. She had me right where she wanted me. "Not feeling well, dearie? That's okay. Let old Maggie make you feel all better." She reached for me, and I knew I had to do something if I didn't want to end up like my sister. I summoned up the last of my strength and bolted for the door, knocking her over in surprise as I did. My legs were rubbery, and I almost tripped into her coffee table, but I managed to make it to the door before she could get up and come after me. The door had 5 locks and a chain, and it seemed that my fumbling hands were taking way too long to open them. When the chain caught, I roared in frustration and closed the door again, shooting it blindly across the runner as I ran for the elevator, the door hanging open behind me. The little number had lit to 5 when I heard the old crone caw behind me. She was in the doorway, clutching her chest and staggering after me, her face as red as a strawberry. I jammed the button in desperation, the old woman taking a staggering step into the hallway as she cawed wordlessly after me. I heard her fall, heard her head smack the ground 20 feet away, but as the doors opened, I bolted inside and pushed the emergency closed button. My last image of her was her prone form lying on the ground as the doors closed ominously. I called the police from the lobby, the manager having to dial the phone since I was way too unsteady once I got there. I slurred out something about being drugged and nearly attacked by the woman in 502, and the police told me to stay in the manager's office until they arrived. I handed him back the phone and heard him talking to the police in a distant, vague way. Whatever she had slipped me was making me loopy, and when I passed out a few minutes later, I wasn't aware of much until a paramedic shone a light in my eyes. The police were there as well, and they had some questions. They had found Maggie in the hallway outside her apartment, dead of a heart attack. The whole apartment had been roped off as a crime scene then, and they suspected that I had caused her heart attack in some way. I denied this fervently, saying that she had drugged me and tried to attack me, and when the toxicology came back, the police seemed a little more likely to listen. The collection of Mary Maid tubs they found stashed in the bedroom went a long way to proving foul play, and I heard they found something in the closet that prompted them to call the FBI. Apparently one of the bedrooms had contained the personal effects of some of the girls, and had prompted a background check into the relatively unknown old woman. They had found some interesting things about her, things that had somehow not followed her from Russia, where her name was Mazzeline. She had been implicated in a number of disappearances, all young girls between 10 and 20, and all having disappeared after being hired to clean her house. She had fled with her then infant son, and Interpol had lost track of her. It seemed now that the search was over, though. I was allowed to go back home, but I'm concerned about my sister and the others that may be stuck in those glass balls. The officers didn't believe me when I told them about the Christmas tree. They probably thought I was still loopy from the drugs, but I know what I saw. Maggie's been doing this for years, I'm sure of it, and tonight I'm going back in to save them. Even if I have to bring the Menagerie back to my apartment, I intend to find a way to free my sister from whatever that witch has done to her. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's story. If you enjoyed tonight's story and you haven't already, why not go ahead and subscribe? Maybe hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the spooky things that we do here. While you're here, maybe go ahead and give that video a like and drop a comment. I like it when people comment. If you're not too spooked and you think you might can handle a little more, why not go ahead and click on one of those other videos that's about to pop up? Maybe check out one of our playlists. There's quite a few. If you'd like to support the channel more monetarily, I'd suggest maybe you go pick up a copy of my latest book, there's a link below, or maybe head on over to Patreon. I have quite a few tiers, I'm sure there's one that'll suit you best. Speaking of Patreon, let's go ahead and thank our patrons, shall we? Thanks to Janet for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributor, and thanks to Winters, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Martha, Marianne Schuler, Jennifer Damron, and Tyler Parker for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributors. Thanks, guys. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you're a fan of my books, I always recommend go ahead and join that Ghostly Reader tier. $10 a month, and it also gets you a book anytime I write one, which is around twice a year usually. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.